And what's the latest on the Special Forces killings that we were talking about a week or two ago?
Yeah, indeed. Well, as I said last week, the report on extrajudicial killings by Special Forces, a decision on the appeal of the former Australian Special Forces soldier, was to be announced on Friday, and this related to a civil defamation case he brought against the journalist Nick Mackenzie. Now, Mackenzie had concluded from his protracted investigations that Robert Smith had committed murder while serving in Afghanistan, and Robert Smith therefore alleged defamation against Mackenzie. Now, the appeal was thrown out, which creates the bizarre legal situation of the federal court agreeing on the balance of probability that multiple murder has been committed. But because this is only a civil affair, Robert Smith faces no criminal sanction for now, at least. This is what Nick Mackenzie had to say about the decision.
Massive relief. It's an emphatic result, and I want to express my deepest gratitude to the brave SASR soldiers who've not only fought for their country in Afghanistan, but fought for the Australian public to know the truth, that Ben Robert Smith is a war criminal. It was always the story of these brave SASR truth tellers. They saw Ben Robert Smith commit war crimes, and they were not prepared to have that covered up. It's a terrifying experience to be put before the full bench of the federal court, but ultimately the full bench of the federal court has scrutinised our journalism and, more importantly, has scrutinised the testimony of SASR soldiers who said what they saw. And the full bench of the federal court has found the truth, that Ben Robert Smith is a war criminal. You can't ask for a more comprehensive process than the full bench of the federal court. To have our journalism scrutinised fully, thoroughly, to have the testimony of our witnesses, those brave SASR soldiers, scrutinised yet again and yet again, the finding is utterly compelling. Ben Robert Smith did do these things. Ben Robert Smith is a war criminal. And I want to acknowledge his victims. There are Afghan women and children who've lost husbands, fathers, because they were murdered on the orders of Ben Robert Smith. They should not be forgotten in all this.
Now, the recent BBC Panorama programme called I Saw War Crimes claims to have taken the testimony of Special Forces veterans, though none has been named, and actors were used for the filming. Reporting on this has been very limited, and there's been extremely little attention on the long-running independent inquiry relating to Afghanistan. But in late January, Lord Justice Haddon Cave, who's charged with running the inquiry, requested that witness November 1141 provided a statement which should have been due within 42 days, which would detail, among other things, an overview of the witness's career, his role as an OC, relationships with individuals and partner forces, serious incident reviews, and an alleged confrontation with another witness. Now, reference to this witness being an OC should mean that he was a squadron leader, which means that he's one of a very small number of people who were in that role. And given the situation with the Australian Special Forces, the reference to partner forces should be considered as particularly significant. In response to the request, the MOD witness legal team wrote to inform the inquiry that November 1141, quote, will be relying on his privilege against self-incrimination and will therefore not be providing a witness statement in response. No further explanation was provided, end quote. So the so-called privilege against self-incrimination is a theme. In March of this year, Haddon Cave released a statement about the obstruction to Obsestro, which is the military police investigation into the extrajudicial killings in the first place, which described how Soldier C refused to give oral evidence despite having complied with a request for a written statement. Such refusals to give evidence are a bad look for UK Special Forces, as they would appear to reinforce the point that they believe themselves to be above the law, not just in relation to killing non-combatants, but also with regard to acting in support of an apparently legitimate judicial process. And the reason for making that point is that the privilege referred to relates to a civil or a criminal case, but not to an inquiry, which is by nature inquisitorial rather than adversarial. So as a consequence, Lord Justice Haddon Cave has now mandated a response from November 1141, and I'll provide updates on this as and when. Now, not only has there been very limited coverage of this issue in the mainstream, but the armed forces hierarchy refused to touch it with a barge pole. And this is a point brought out in a piece in the Telegraph by ex-army journalist James Jeffrey, who asks why no general will take responsibility. And the answer, as always, is that it's not politically expedient for them to do so. And to reinforce the point, I refer to the appointment of General Gwyn Jenkins as First Sea Lord, the probability of which I mentioned last week. Now, this is important because when he was Director of Special Forces, Jenkins is believed to have ordered Special Forces personnel to lean on civil servants in order to block Afghans from coming to the UK to give evidence in the Afghan inquiry. And again, as to be expected, the counter-narrative is being bolstered continually, and here we see the omnipresent Hamish de Bretton-Gordon writing for the British Forces Broadcasting Services that we should not rush to judgment on the allegation against Special Forces, which indeed may be the case, though it's quite clear that he's preparing the ground for public opinion to be such that a criminal trial, were it to go ahead, may well end up being prejudiced.
Yes, well, that will continue to rumble on, I'm quite sure, and with massive attempts to sweep it under the rug.
I think very desperate attempts, and I think the appointment of Gwyn Jenkins amidst this controversy absolutely telegraphs that precise intent.
Yes. Okay, well, Vanessa, let's come to you now. Welcome to the programme.